How's it going, guys? Yasukeh here. I just want to make a video going on the durability changes in League and how these affect Tryndamere, as I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily understanding what this could mean for Tryndamere. And I also wanted to talk about builds, what's been working for me, and where I see that builds will be going for Tryndamere in the future, as well as what is the best right now. So first off, I just wanted to get into Galeforce as an item. And then there's really something incredibly interesting to think about when it comes to the entire game, when it comes to this Galeforce change. Because in 11.2, there was a cooldown increase on the active on Galeforce from 60 to 90. 30 seconds or a 50% increase. And this change, despite being very large, was not actually that significant. What was very significant was the 90-second to 110-second. I was playing with this a lot after it got nerfed, and it just always felt like it was just barely on cooldown when I needed it. And in addition to the passive move speed nerfs, like, I feel like this item is just not very valuable because it feels like the timer in a standard game where you go from fight to recall to fight is within this 90 to 110 second window. So when you're running Galeforce, you often don't have the active when it's most important to you. And while it is very important to have mobility on Tryndamere, we'll go into this with Mythics later, is that I feel like it's really important to have what is the strongest thing in any particular paradigm. So it's better to go a strong damage item than it is to go a weak mobility item, even if you want mobility. And after these changes, I tried using Stridebreaker again, because that's what I hit Challenger with. I had tons of experience using it, and I wanted to see if the item was going to be good again, but it's just not enough damage. It doesn't have the dash, the slow is weak. It just doesn't bring enough to the table to be useful. So I think that on almost every situation, you should just be running Kraken Slayer, because Kraken Slayer is the strongest item in any particular paradigm that you could be running on Tryndamere, because it's the best damage item that there is. And especially if you consider it in the context of my build, when you think about the standard lethal tempo ghost build, you're heavily reliant on that ghost cooldown to get mobility to actually be able to properly stack Kraken Slayer. Whereas when you have Phase Rush, you always have the ability to stick onto somebody. So you always have the ability to use Kraken, and since you're able to use Kraken Slayer, it makes up for the damage loss from not having lethal tempo. And the extra attack speed on it is just incredibly massive. You pair it with an Essence Reaver Rush, and the Essence Reaver proc plus the Kraken proc is just incredible burst damage. Like, you basically become an assassin. So the standard build that I have been running, and I've had a lot of success with it, it's been feeling really good, is Lucidity Rush into Essence Reaver. And that Essence Reaver Rush plus the Lucidity Rush gives you a lot of ability haste or cooldown reduction. And that cooldown reduction makes up for the ult nerfs that happened a couple patches ago. It doesn't really feel super significant, because if you don't run any CDR, like you see some like Tryndameres do, your ult is just always down. It goes past that 90 to 110 second range where you feel like you need it. Whereas when you have extra CDR early, if you fight as soon as your ult is up, enemies will think your ult is down. They will not expect it. And that goes to the highest level. Like, people just have in their mind an idea of what Tryndamere's ult cooldown is. So if all of a sudden you have it up 30, 40 seconds earlier, then you can get a lot of just amazing plays where somebody all-ins you, and then all of a sudden you press ult, and then you just win. It's incredibly valuable getting that CDR early. Essence Reaver has all of the stats you'd want on Tryndamere. It has cooldown reduction, crit AD, and the Sheen proc is incredibly valuable, especially because you're generally going to be getting it around the 8 to 9 minute mark. You have 5 minutes to be able to use the Essence Reaver to take turret plates. So you just spin on the turret, auto, and then as soon as the Sheen proc comes back up, you Q, and you just melt through turrets. And that extra gold value is really, really, really valuable. And especially with starting items too. I feel like it's really... This is something you see a lot with AD carries nowadays. AD carries are going longsword in 3 pots. Because 3 pots and longsword are the highest regen start that you could have, unless you're in lane for 10 plus minutes, basically. And not only does longsword build into your other actual items, it also has the highest AD, so it is the most aggressive start while you still do have sustain. Because it's, for Doran's Blade, as an example, it's 8 AD versus the 10 AD from the longsword. And even then, you should always be going either Doran's Shield in really hard matchups where you don't feel like you can do anything, or the longsword start. If you're in any matchup where you feel a little bit confident and, like, you know, tussling a little bit, I'd highly recommend the longsword start, because it also gets you your items faster, and it makes your curve be that much more accelerated. Especially when you pair it with the Essence Reaver Rush. Essence Reaver is already 600 gold cheaper than any other mythic in the game. So you're going to be getting your first item spike 800 gold cheaper, plus the fact that your starting item is building into your first item. So you're getting your first item way, way before anybody else is, and that's just incredibly powerful for you to do. And then Kraken also not only having the attack speed passive, which is really valuable because it gives you that sort of little extra attack speed that you'd be lacking. It just feels amazing. And then the third thing that I go, this game I went Hex Drinker because their AP champions were fed. However, in almost all situations, I've been going Blade of the Ruined King third. And you hear a lot of people say things like, lifesteal isn't good on Tryndamere, or like, oh, Bork is just a bad item. But it's... people need to understand sort of context with that. For 10 seasons, Tryndamere has always built lifesteal. It's only after the new mythic item changes where there hasn't been a good lifesteal item for Tryndamere to build. And that's the important key distinction. Tryndamere doesn't build lifesteal right now, not because lifesteal is bad on Tryndamere, but because there's no good source of lifesteal in the game that's worth going over something else. But, especially in the context of this build, I feel like this iteration of Blade of the Ruined King is incredibly powerful. Not only is it tons of attack speed, but the movement speed steal on it is just so strong for getting picks. And then you pair that attack speed, that also helps you get more Kraken Slayer procs off. Like, you're not only going to be melting people, because Blade of the Ruined King is designed to be a duelist item, but you're not only melting people, but you also make it easier to catch people out. Like, you're trading on somebody, and then all of a sudden you get a slow from the auto attacks plus your regular slow. It makes it really, really easy if you need some, like, team to come help collapse on somebody. It's, like, the amount of damage in this build is just incredibly high. And then you pair it with typically a Phantom Dancer fourth to cap out your crit. I feel like you need to always have at least 2 crit items in your first couple items because crit is just very valuable. But I don't think you need to instantly get 3 crit items. So that's where you can get that Bork, because the Bork, when you have this, you have 80% attack speed, or 80% crit, which is more than enough. And then the Phantom Dancer, more attack speed, tons of attack speed, so that you get more Kraken Slayer procs off, you get Bork procced off easier, like and more movement speed too. Because the movement speed on Phantom Dancer makes it so much easier to stick to people despite not having Galeforce. I don't think that Galeforce is as important as people would think on Tryndamere right now, just because it's just such a weak item. And typically I have been going a defensive item in a lot of situations, especially when I'm ahead. But that's also something that could change with the durability changes. Because one thing right now is that with how much damage is in the game right now, it's really easy just to get one shot. And so going a defensive item like Maw or Randuin's makes it to where you don't get one shot and you can survive a couple more seconds without your ult. And then a lot of champions have a threshold where if they pass that threshold of popping your ults, they're really useful. But if they just let you live with like 300 HP after they use their initial burst combo, they're completely useless. So getting an item like a Maw against like a Veigar or something, like there was a fed Veigar in this game, all of a sudden your shield from Maw at this point is 1,000 damage, because you're getting more AD than anybody else who would really use Maw. So, the Maw proc also has Omnivamp, so it's even more sustain. Just really, really, really valuable to make sure you don't die. Randuin's can also be good in higher AD comps. But it just depends. If you are more behind, you need to risk going more damage. So that's generally the case, and 6th item, just built boots. But, so that is generally what I've been doing for Tryndamere builds, and that just all feels really, really good. And you notice that IE is not a core item. That's something that Step 1v9 made a video about, that IE is not a super core item, and I honestly agree with it. I've been running a ton of builds that don't have IE as their core 3 crit items, and it really doesn't feel like it's that mandatory anymore. Like, ideally you'd think, hey, Tryndamere crits a lot, so get something that makes your crits bigger, but just getting other items just gives you so much more inherent value, and it's also not as expensive. It gives other utility as opposed to just damage. Like, movement speed is a tool that gives you the ability to not only get damage by going onto people, but it allows you to dodge skill shots. It allows you to get out of situations easier. And it also just gives more damage because that attack speed makes you get more Kraken procs off. And it also makes you take turrets faster. Whereas IE doesn't do anything for turrets. You can't crit turrets, but you can attack speed turrets. So I haven't been valuing IE as a very core item on Tryndamere right now. So next thing is getting into the durability changes. And I've seen a lot of people say that these changes are going to be terrible for Tryndamere, and I completely disagree. One thing that is true is that after the changes to the turret damage, and with the way that healing is getting nerfed and all of that stuff, you will not be able to survive an extra turret shot with a Q plus Triumph after a dive. That is true, and that is a nerf to Tryndamere. However, for me at least, I've never run Triumph anyway, so I've already got the skills to not need to have that extra turret shot to survive after a dive. And especially Phase Rush just makes it so much easier to dive because you can get onto somebody after they like flash away from you on the other side of the turret or something. The Triumph nerf is about the only thing that I can see is actually a nerf to Tryndamere. These changes are amazing for Tryndamere. One thing is that Tryndamere has infinite damage. Like, he doesn't have a burst combo and then can't do anything. You have constant sustained DPS, and this patch, these durability changes to League are going to be the AD carry meta. And you know who does well in an AD carry meta? A melee AD carry, like Tryndamere. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Like, you are a champion who will still have the damage to sort of fight through things. And the most important thing, Tryndamere has been coming a lot harder to play overall in League of Legends because of how much damage has been added to the game. There's so many times where you get one shot in 0.00 seconds from stealth. And it just becomes so hard to manage. Oh, hey, I was, let me show you this clip right now. Perfect example of it. This is exactly what you see with Tryndamere in the current season. That happens way more often than it should. And while that is Caitlyn who's doing it from range, which makes it just so much more tilting, like, this happens with so many different champions where this is just an off-screen kill, whereas other kills are just stealth kills. And this makes, like, literally 100 to 0. Like, what do you do right there? The durability changes completely get rid of that. Completely gone. The durability changes mean that you can't get one shot in your ult anymore. You can't get one shot to where you don't expect it as easily, so that you have more reliability in your ult. And because how much damage has been added into the game, it's been harder and harder to ult over time. These changes, bringing it back to a simpler time, is going to be so valuable for Tryndamere. Not only do you have the DPS, and you are also being able to reliably ult. Like, all of these changes are just really, really good for Tryndamere, and I don't see how anybody could think otherwise. I'm really looking forward to Tryndamere in these new patches. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Tryndamere is buffed during this? What do you think about the build? Try it out. Should have some videos coming out on it soon. See you guys in the next video. Let me know what you guys think about the changes. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye. And good night. Yeet!